Hey up there, my wonderful Wednesday crew. Before we dig in today, I've got a little tease for you. When I was just a young girl, a mere 27, I secured our first massive contract. It was 10 times bigger than anything we'd had before and a complexity that we'd never seen. There were multiple stakeholders and we had several of my team working on it. Boy, was I excited. But it definitely wasn't plain sailing. And it's a classic lesson in influence and how when your back is against a wall, you can find the resourcefulness you just never knew you actually had. Welcome back to Unshakable Her, helping ambitious women who are constantly second-guessing themselves to build the daily habits that compound into unshakable confidence. I'm Caroline Esterson and I'm in your corner. Today it's Wednesday, which means it's time for the science of what's holding you back. Because frankly, just believing yourself isn't going to get you the promotion, the pay rise, or the influence. But understanding what's actually happening in your head and why turns what's wrong with me into, that's what's happening. That's how unshakable confidence gets built. Let's go. So today, here's what you're getting. 1. The neuroscience of why informal connection builds influence differently and more powerfully than the formal interactions that you have. I think this might make you a little cross, but hopefully usefully so. 2, my international telecoms story. The night I was 27, terrified, and made the decision that taught me more about influence than anything before, or probably since actually. And 3, not in the club this week, we will talk about how your organisation didn't set out to eliminate your influence, but frankly, it might as well have done, and you need to know why. But before we go full throttle into the science, a little aside, some of you will know that my husband's an MP. Now, Westminster is the best place to people watch. It really is. It's a microcosm of everything that is both baffling and brilliant in people. Here's what I've noticed watching someone operate in genuinely political rooms for well over a decade. The conversations, the ones that move things, are almost never the ones on the agenda. They're the ones in between the agendas, in the corridor while someone's putting the coat on, at the bar, on the terrace, over lunch. The ones that look from the outside like just a chat, like nothing at all. And organisations have calendared most of these out of existence. I've been in organisations recently, really good ones that are thoughtful about people, but the informal conversations have effectively ceased to exist, where you can work with a team member for 6 months and never speak to them outside a structured meeting or on Slack, where the only way to build a relationship is to book one, where every interaction has a purpose, an agenda, an end time, and absolutely no room for the thing that was never on the agenda, but was actually the real point of the conversation. So today I want to talk to you about what this is costing us, specifically what it's costing the Rachels of the world. You remember Rachel from Monday? And then I want to tell you a story about a Thursday evening on the M6 motorway and the moment I nearly drove away from the most important career lesson I've ever had. But first, it's Wednesday, so you know what that means. Yep, we're going full throttle into the science. Are you ready? The science bit, because facts beat fear every time. So here's something the data on this is completely unambiguous about. It's one of those things so obvious in hindsight that you'll wonder why nobody said it out louder sooner. Informal interaction builds trust faster, deeper, and more durably than formal interaction. Full stop. No ambiguity. And this isn't because the formal meetings are bad, but it's because our brains process these interactions differently. When you meet someone in a structured setting, for example, a meeting room, on a Teams call or in a presentation, your brain is in evaluation mode. It's assessing what this means for you. It's assessing competence, processing the content, competence, managing the interaction. It is full on evaluating. So there's no room for anything else. But when you meet someone in an informal setting, like the coffee queue, something different happens. The brain relaxes its evaluation filters. It processes the person rather than the performance, and the connections it builds in that relaxed state are stickier, warmer, and much more likely to be recalled positively when that person's name comes up in a conversation. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA on social cognition makes this perfectly plain. Our brains have a dedicated system for social processing that switches on during unstructured interaction and switches off during task-focused activity. We are literally neurologically more available to each other in the margins than we are in the meetings. And organisations have eliminated all those margins. We just haven't caught up yet to do something about it. This is what happened to Rachel. She was performing brilliantly in every formal interaction, but the informal moments where her warmth could have been converted to connection, where someone senior could have experienced her as a person rather than just a function or a job role, those moments are gone. Her days were structured from start to finish. All the gaps had been filled. And so the people who mattered knew that she was really good at a job, but they didn't know who she was. And you can't follow someone you don't know. Yet you can respect them and you can know that you can rely on them. But fellowship, that requires something else. It requires the kind of trust that only builds in those unscheduled moments. The organisations that went fully remote or fully calendared didn't just lose the office banter. They lost the incubator, the place where influence grew between the agenda items. And nobody's put that on the risk register, have they? Now, here's where it gets personal. I want to tell you about a Thursday evening. I was 27. It was our first major contract with an international telecoms company, which was significant for a young consultancy with a lot to prove. I've been commissioned by somebody with authority. They had both the budget and the sign-off capability. But, and there's a big but, there was an operations director on the client side who had wanted to bring in her own people, a team that she'd worked with before. And she wasn't going to be quiet about her feelings on the matter. I faced obstruction and resistance from the very first interaction. You know, the kind of professional friction that is impossible to prove, but oh God, it's exhausting to navigate. And in my innocence, and I want you to hear that word because it does matter. In my innocence, I challenged her directly and probably less skillfully than I would do now. And then I got in my car and I started driving home. About 45 minutes into my journey from Leeds down to Kent, my phone rang and it was the HR director of this company. Oh boy, she tore me off a strip. I'd never met this woman before. In my car, on the motorway while I'm driving, telling me that I'd overstepped, that the operations director was a key stakeholder, that I needed to understand how things worked around there. My first instinct was to accept it, to apologise, to smooth it over. You know, I wanted to be liked again. And maybe there was a moment where I even thought, perhaps we're not right for this contract. And I'm telling you this because that instinct, the one that says go quiet, go soft, make it comfortable for everybody, it's a natural instinct. And it's the very thing that keeps brilliant women stuck. It's the people pleaser in every one of us, the one who would rather be liked than right. I had too much riding on this contract to just sit back and take it. I went back to the office, knocked on the HRD's door, and I said calmly that actually I didn't think it was appropriate to receive feedback like that whilst I was driving on a motorway without having the opportunity to give my perspective. So I'm here to do that now and have a proper conversation. She looked at me for a moment and, give her a due, she apologised. We had a good talk and she suggested I go speak to the ops director, which of course I was going to do anyway. I thanked her and left. And then I went to go and find the ops director. I sat down and I said, you know what? It's clear you don't want us here. And I get that. You weren't involved in the decision. Maybe you should have been, but that wasn't my call. And we have been commissioned. We have a contract, and I know we can deliver for you. But I'd rather spend our energy on making this work than managing a conflict that helps nobody. So what do you need from me to make this work? She told me. She promised the work elsewhere, and she was embarrassed. And I said as kindly as I could that it wasn't my problem. My problem is about delivering something excellent for you. So let's talk about how I help you with that. She stood down, she let us work, and she was delighted with the results. That contract was pivotal to our growth going forward. So it was really worthwhile digging in on it. The conversation wasn't warm. It wasn't about being liked. It was about being professional and understanding what she actually needed and helping give her a bit of a way out that kept her dignity intact and giving her that without apology. That's what influence is about. It's not about warmth. It's about clarity, courage, and the willingness to go back when everything in you wants to drive away. I was 27. I'd never done anything like it before. And the thing that made it possible was the first step, turning the car around. Because influence isn't a personality trait. It's a decision. And it starts the moment you choose not to drive away. Not the club, just bad processes. The system's the problem, not you. Let's fix it for you and the next one in. Right then, let's talk about what organisations are doing. Not maliciously, but actually consistently at scale. Most organisations will tell you that they value relationships, that influence is important. They put it in competency frameworks. They talk about it in organisational-wide meetings. Build relationships, communicate with impact, lead through influence rather than authority. All of these phrases, they're in there somewhere, beautifully worded, but completely unsupported by the actual structure of the working day. Because they then fill everyone's calendar from 8 until 6. They make hybrid working the default without thinking about what hybrid working does to informal connection. They run efficiency drives that eliminate the margins we're talking about. They measure productivity and outputs and forget that the conversation nobody scheduled and nobody minuted was producing something that doesn't show up in any report until the day someone brilliant hands in their notice and nobody quietly knows why. By the time of the exit interview, they're fully checked out, so they don't tell you the truth about why they're leaving. For you got let off the hook there, didn't you? Rachel didn't struggle to build influence because she lacked the skill. She struggled to do it because the environment had quietly removed every informal space where influence grows and then assessed her against a standard that she'd never been given the conditions to meet. It's not personal or a conspiracy. It is an organisation that is optimised for efficiency and accidentally optimised against the thing that makes people want to follow their leaders rather than just report to them. You can't always change that, but you can know it's there. And knowing it means you can stop waiting for the margins to reappear. Start creating them deliberately for yourself. Because Rachel didn't wait, did she? She started engineering those informal meetings. Being in the room for important meetings, not remote, and arriving a few minutes early. The message that was not about the work, the coffee that was not on the agenda, the conversation that was not necessary, but actually really critical. This isn't political or playing a game. This is understanding where influence actually lives and going there on purpose. So here are 3 questions for you to help you assess the moves that you want to make. Question 1, look at your calendar for this week. Where are the margins, those unscheduled informal moments? If there are none, that's not a full calendar, that's a missing ingredient. Question 2, think about the most influential person you know in the organisation, not the most senior, the one with the most influence. Where did they have conversations? When did they have them? I bet it's not exclusively in formal meetings. And question 3, where is there a conversation you've been avoiding, the equivalent of driving away because it might be uncomfortable? And what would actually happen if you turned your car around in that moment? What do you reckon then? Is there room for you to bridge a little bit of a gap somewhere? The gap between where Rachel was and where she needed to be, that wasn't a skill gap, it was a location gap. And these questions will show you where the right places are. So give them a go. So let me close down now my 3 promises that I made to you at the start before we close this episode. I said you get the neuroscience, and it was really simple this week, wasn't it? The brain processes informal interaction differently, more openly, more warmly, with stickier results. That's not a soft argument for having nice chats. That is a hard argument, a hard commercial argument for engineering the informal moments your organisation has actually eliminated. Lieberman's work is worth looking up if you want to go deeper. It'll change how you look at your diary. I said you get my story, and I hope it's what gives you a bit of a permission slip, not to make things difficult, but just to turn your car around, to say the true thing clearly with care without apologising for having a perspective. It's not conflict, that's influence. And remember the question I asked. So what do you need from me to make this work? This is a key outcome-focused question to really meet people where they are. That's influence. And finally, I said you'd understand the system, the quietly, accidentally, nobody meant to version, the one that is costing brilliant women the careers they've already built. You know it now. Use it. Right, on to Friday, episode 100. I can't quite believe it. And we're going to be doing something with all this information we've talked about this week. Of course, a song, or what would Caro do that made me want to call the listener directly? And 3 moves that take everything Rachel learnt and everything I learnt on that motorway and turn them into something you can use before the end of the week. Friday. See you then. Don't miss it. That's it for today. Before you go, if something in this episode made you think, that's why I do that, hit follow wherever you're listening, because that moment of recognition, that's where Unshakable starts. Remember, I'm in your corner. See you Friday.